Hi 803, this is the second video where I'm going to step through the exam, make sure that you have every concept down. As we saw in the first video, the key to this exam is really understanding the solution to systems of equations. A system of equation is just where one equation intersects with another equation. It happens in our particular case at one and only one point if it happens at all. In this case, it is very easy to see it intersects right here, so I need to find the name of that point. So the name of any point is always its x and then its y coordinate. The x is always first and the y is always second. So I look down and I see that my x, and I make sure that I'm reading it carefully, my x is -1. And I count up 1, 2, 3. My x is +3. So that is my solution to my system of equations. Second, funny, it's almost exactly the same thing. In this case, I see two lines, and I am given the equation to both of those lines. If I had to draw them, I could, but they're drawn very nicely for me. And the question just says, which ordered pair is the solution? And once again, an ordered pair is always the x and then the y. So you're going to look at this graph and try to find what the x is. You find the point that they intersect, which is right here. My x is first, so I look directly down and find my x value, and then I look across and find my y value, which is right here, and that is the solution point. Basically, the solution point is going to tell me that in year 4 I had 10,000 people, so it's the two lines of the population growth where both lines meet. If I am going to write on this one, it says, what is the solution to the systems of equations below? It gives me two equations, and I know that I could use the substitution or I could use graphing, but I can also see that my coefficients are the same. So when my coefficients are the same, I can simply draw a line and add them up, because one is going to cancel out another. When I add these two things up, my y's cancel. I'm left with 5x, and -2 plus -8 is going to be -10. So I'm left with 5x equals -10, and you can take it from there. In order to find my x, the opposite of multiplication is division. I'm going to divide both sides by 5, and I'm left with x is equal to -2. I quickly scan my answer choices. It happens to be that that is the only one. Okay, let's keep moving. So far so good, nothing really very challenging. And my next one, I have a graph of linear equations, and it says which ordered pair is the best estimate. And this word best is important because where they intersect is not exactly on any one point. Usually the points when I'm looking to find slope will be exactly on this point or exactly on that point. But as you can see, this one is halfway in between -2 and -4. So you're going to have to look down at your answer choices and just decide which one of those makes the most sense. Number 5, a system of equations is shown below. Two sentences, and it doesn't ask me to solve anything, but it does ask me, what do I know about this point, -6 and 8? And the first one, it is the only solution to the system. If it is the only solution, then if I substitute -6 and 8 in, it satisfies, or it makes each statement true. And unfortunately on this one, you're actually going to have to do the work and try substituting 6 and 8 into each one of the systems to determine if it's true for both systems, if it's not true for either system, if it is one of many, which doesn't look to be the case, and is a solution to the first but not the second. You're just going to substitute and check. if true. Turning the page, again, nothing too bad. And once again, we have another system of equations. And it just says, explains why the point, and it actually tells you the name of the solution point. X is -2, and y is +2. So it tells me, like, okay, that is a system. So it says, it gives me some choices. It lies on the graph of only one of the equations. Well, that can't be because it lies on the graph of both. It is the only point that satisfies both simultaneously, and the word simultaneously just means things that happen together. It is one of many points, so you need to decide which of those statements is true. Number 7. What is the solution to the system of equations below? So I look over it and I think, well, I can graph it. That's a lot of trouble. I can use substitution. That's a lot of trouble too. But once again, I think if I just add these two statements up, because I have a 3 and a 3, and one of them is negative, I know they're going to cancel. So I'm left with 2x plus 1x is 3x. My 3's cancel, and 6 plus 9 is conveniently 15. So in order to solve for x, the opposite of multiplication is division. So x is going to be equal to 5. So I can look at my answer choices and see, well, there's only one that does that. But just to be sure, I take my 5 and I substitute it back in for the equation and solve for y. It has to be on both equations. And again, this is getting a little bit old because I have the same old graph of the system of equations below. And this time it says what systems represent the graph. And they made an intersection point, which is not very nice because it's in between 2 points on both sides. So it's not easy to see where they solve each other. So I have to go back to my strategy of finding the equation of each line. So finding the equation of each line. And remember that the first thing that I'm going to do is look for, step 1, I'm going to look for the y-intercept. After I find the y-intercept, so I look for the y-intercept first, and step 2 is to find the slope. And the way I find the slope, let's look for the y-intercept because that's pretty easy to do. So let's say I have this line in purple. That's my first line. And it's really to see its intersection point is right here at 0, 0. And my second is right here is at 10. When x is 0, y is 10. So I have 1 and 2 as my intersection points. Now I look at my answer choices to see if I can get rid of anything. And unfortunately my answer choices all are 10, 0, 10, 0, 10, 0, 10, 0. So this doesn't help me too much because they all have the right y-intercept. So I have to rely on finding slope, kind of like finding Nemo. But in order to find slope, I remember that the equation is y1 minus y2 divided by x1 minus x2. And if I don't want to find any one of those points, which is pretty easy to do, I can actually just count. So remember, I'm going to count my change in my rise, and I'm dividing it with my change in my run. And that's going to give me the slope. And again, the slope is either going to be -2, the slope is going to be, -2 on 2, or the slope is going to be 1/2 or 1/3. Okay, so far so good. Now here is one last before we start to get into the more challenging questions. And it says solve the systems of equations below. And it says 2x plus 4y equals 10, 2x plus 4y equals -10. I can see right away I have a very big problem because my coefficients are the same on both of them. If I try to subtract it, not only am I going to eliminate x, I'm also going to eliminate y. Therefore, I just don't know how you are possibly going to solve this. But give it a try, look at it, and just see how many solutions you could possibly have if you have no x and you have no y. Last one I'm going to try to do on this tape, keep it to just 12 minutes, is if I have two rectangles. Here's my rectangle, my first rectangle. The name of this rectangle is P. Then I have another rectangle. The name of this rectangle is Q. So I have P and I have Q. And it says perimeter. Remember that we find the perimeter by adding up all the sides. It's not the area, which is multiplying the sides. I add all sides. So when I add all sides, it tells me that the perimeter of P is 20. So that means if I add h, and this also is h, and that's j plus 4, so this has to be j plus 4. So if I add h plus j plus 4 plus j plus 4, I'm going to get a perimeter of 20. So take a minute to digest that. It's the basis for the problem. I just know that if I have two h's, I have 2h, and I have 2 j's, and I have 4 plus 4 is 8. That equals 20. So I have an equation on this side. I know that I can combine my like terms, and I'm going to move that 8 over by subtracting 8, and I am left with 2h plus 2j equals 12. Okay, so that doesn't help me too much because I need to know what both h and j are, but I have only one equation and two variables. In order to solve it, you need an equation for every variable that you have. So I'm going to go over to Q, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. And this time Q, the perimeter, if I add this side plus this side plus this side plus this side, I get 30 inches. So I know that if I add 2 times 3h plus 2 times j plus 1, I will get 30. So I'm going to just let you crank through that. You're going to end up with two equations, and it's your job to decide how I solve for each variable. And moving along. I'm asked to determine the solution to the systems below, and really important, you have to show your work. So in this particular case, I can see that I have, I'm not going to try to graph it. I'm going to try to use elimination, or I could use substitution because they give me the choice. It doesn't tell me which one to use. So just decide what you like better, elimination or substitution. And someplace on this paper, you need to show the work in order to solve it. Question number 9, a very standard word problem. A customer wants to look at two different text message plans at Cellular Bargains. So there are two plans he's going to choose from, or maybe it's a she, and they want to find out which plan allows the most text messages for the same cost. So the pay per plan charges 10 cents. I'm assuming, nope, $10 per month. So I know my equation is going to start with y, the total cost. My y-intercept is 10. That's the fixed amount. I pay that whether or not I make any calls at all or any text messages. And then I'm going to add 10 cents per message, so 0.1 per text message. So let's use x. So that's the equation for the first plan. Y equals $10 plus 10 cents per message. So you're going to need to come up with the equation for the second one, which has the same structure, and then come down here and graph each one. In order to find what is the cheapest plan, or what they call the break-even point, I'm going to come up with another equation, y, and then I'm going to set the two equations equal to each other and solve for x.